Good morning, everybody. My name is Phil Ike, and joining me today is the city manager for the city of Allegan, Joel Dye. Good morning, Joel.
Good morning, Phil. How are you doing?
I'm doing really, really well. I'm excited to talk to you today. In my research before recording, I stumbled across somebody that said Allegan has used almost every service available through the MEDC, and so I think we're gonna have a fun conversation today talking about all the things that you guys have happening in Allegan. But before we get to that, maybe give me a little bit of the lay of the land. Tell me about Allegan as a community.
Sure. Yeah. So Allegan is the county seat for Allegan County. We are what I would qualify as a small town. We're a population of approximately 5,000 people. The Kalamazoo River meanders through our city, and so we're really defined by the river that goes through our town here. We are located in West Michigan. We're equidistant from the Kalamazoo metro area, the Grand Rapids metro area, and the Lake Shore. So we're a really good home base, for people looking to experience a little bit of the urban life that Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo offers, or the beach life that Lake Michigan offers.
Very cool. You kind of get the best of all the worlds.
We do, very much so.
How long have you been city manager of Allegan?
So I've been the city manager here since 2017. So I think I'm going on my 7th year right now.
Very, very cool. So talk to me about this, your interaction with the MEDC. In many communities, a community might be Michigan Main Street community. Another one might be Redevelopment Ready community, or sometimes both, or, getting other services. But here you guys going all in with the MEDC. How did that really begin, that relationship with the MEDC?
Yeah, so my predecessor actually started this relationship back, I think it was 2013, when they became Redevelopment Ready Certified, a few years before I showed up here. I believe Allegan was one of the first communities that became RRC certified. So there was a kind of a kickstart here in Allegan that they just wanted to do something. And so my predecessor moved on to Ohio, and I came in here in 2017. And at that time, I was fortunate enough that there was already a foundation, an urge to just do something in downtown Allegan. And I was able to work with local developers, promote some local staff here to some decision-making positions. And we were able to just, get the ball rolling on a lot of projects. And thankfully, the MEDC was, lockstep with us, asking, how can we help you now, kind of thing. What's the next thing we want to work on?
That had to be attractive to you as somebody coming into the community in a kind of a position of service and leadership, that the community already had gone through the RRC process. They were already certified. They had taken care of that. That has to be very attractive to you by looking at a community saying, wow, they're in it. They're trying to make things happen. They want to do something, like you said. I love that phrase. And so just from a kind of an HR talent attraction retention standpoint, that's got to be awesome. You're walking into a community that's already got that ball rolling.
Yeah, so that was very much one of the spotlights that was shining on the city that made me want to come here and be part of this team. I remember talking about during the interview process, talking to the city council members at that time, and they were sharing, their vision. And I, in preparation for the interview, I read some of their plans. I saw their vision. It was kind of established. And I'm like, okay, I can come in here because I'm someone who likes to get stuff done. Mm-hmm. And, the planning was kind of already established. So I was able to walk in and say, okay, let's just start implementing this stuff. And it was a lot of quick wins for us. That's been really, really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Maybe break it down a little bit. RRC, how did it set Allegan up for success? How did Allegan come out of that certification process a better community? Talk to me. Like, I don't know anything about RRC. I don't know what that means. Break it down how it helped Allegan.
So that RRC process that they established here in Allegan really, allowed them to do some self-reflection of what kind of community they wanted to be. So they were able to, rewrite their zoning ordinance that helped kind of set their vision, and allow them to adopt what I'm going to call some new urbanist principles for their downtown. And probably the best part about the RRC process in my mind is it just allowed the community to get a place at the table with the MEDC when we're looking at ways to improve our community. I mean, it's almost like having like the bat phone where you can just pick it up, call Lansing, and they're picking it up as well. So I really appreciate that part of the RRC.
I love that you describe it like you're picking up the bat phone, especially considering the size of Allegan. You have like 5,000 folks, and typically in smaller communities, capacity is an issue. Access to resources is an issue, and a lot of times, all you want is to be able to walk in and say, I just want to call somebody for some help or for access to some kind of resource that we desperately need to make this site ready for redevelopment or something like that. And it sounds like you found that in RRC and the MEDC.
Yeah, and a great example is when I first came here. So I started January of 2017. February 2017 was when I got my first phone call from a developer saying, hey, I stumbled on your town. It wasn't a local developer. It was someone who's from a neighboring town in a neighboring county. And they're just like, I stumbled on your town. You have this big building right in the middle of your main street that's vacant. It used to be an old J.C. Penney building. And, so those 1940s department stores that you would see in the small towns. Yep. And they're like, I really see, apartments on the second floor, and I see commercial, storefronts on the first floor. And they're like, how can we make this happen? Prior to coming to Allegan, I was a community planner for the city of Holland. So Holland, Michigan went through a rejuvenation in the 90s and early 2000s and had a great downtown Main Street. And so when you take a town like Allegan, they don't have the local developers that are just knocking on the door right away. So there's not a lot of capital resource. So you have to be able to make that contact with the state and connect them with developers that just want to do something. So speed up the process, within 2 years, that J.C. Penney building was completely revitalized. The MEDC worked with us to get us $700,000 CDBG grant for the developer. And now we have 7 lofts on the second floor, 5 commercial spaces fully occupied on the first floor. And so it really is that bat phone of picking it up and being able to make that phone call and get into those conversations with the state and the MEDC on how can we make this happen. And if we weren't RRC at that time, that work would have not been established yet. We wouldn't have had that relationship, which is crucial for development.
It's so interesting to me that you brought up that topic of small town needing redevelopment, but not having the population really required to have a stockpile of local developers who have the experience or the capacity or the resources to be able to pull off, especially large redevelopments. Because at lunch today, I was talking to a couple friends of mine about that exact issue, about a community that desperately wants to have big things happen, and they have a vibrant community of people, and they're passionate. But what they really need to unlock the future is somebody who can come in and capably and competently redevelop these huge properties that they have, really limiting the future of their community. And you brought up like having this RRC certification, connecting to the MEDC. Now you're connected to developers whose radar you may not have been on otherwise. And on top of that, I, as a developer from outside, look at you and say, wow, they are a redevelopment ready community. And I've worked with one elsewhere, and that made my life easier. And you referenced having access to $700,000 of capital to help that developer. And now that's really intriguing to me too, because now this investment that I'm also making makes a lot of sense. I don't have to make that $700,000 back in a relatively small community. So this sounds like an amazing situation.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's amazing how it builds on each other. There's a level of incrementalism where it's, one block on two. So that project led to actually a local person here then saying, all right, I'm willing to make this investment now because I saw someone else kind of like forge the path for me. And, that resulted in an individual buying a city-owned property also in our downtown. It's called 136 Brady Street. The city owned it for like the past 15 years. Similar kind of story, vacant building, both the second floor and the first floor. Pigeons are living in it. And they were able to say, hey, if the city can work with us on a purchase price, we can go ahead and utilize, federal historic tax credits for the rehab. And that resulted in 4 apartments on the second floor. And I think they have 5, commercial spaces on the first floor. It's like the 1920s arcade shopping, kind of buildings they used to have where there's individual stores with a common corridor. And so, within the first 3 years, we were able to get, 11 apartments in our downtown, 7 that was part of the MEDC, and then 4 that came on, because the MEDC kind of forged a path forward and showed a way, for people to get things done. There's a phrase we use in Allegan, and it's investment begets investment. So if we get someone investing, then another person's going to invest, and then another person's going to invest. And that really has become our motto for the past, 7 years here.
As you were talking, it kind of popped into my head. Like, you're trying to move a big old boulder. Like, what's the hardest part of that? It's the start of it. It's getting that initial push, and you need 2 or 3 people. But once that ball's rolling, like, depending on the situation, it could roll down that hill for the rest of its life if it wanted to. And that's kind of what it sounds like here, is that initial step of entering into a relationship with the MEDC through the RRC certification toolkit really helped push that. And now other people say, okay, this is a risky investment, but it's not as risky as it was pre-2017 because that's happening and I can open my business here because now we have more people living downtown and there's more housing opportunities. Very cool.
Yeah. And then, I'm just going to keep on going with this, domino effect, because after that happened, then 2 business owners downtown that, had second floors that were vacant were like, hey, Joel, we could put apartments on our second floors. What programs are out there? So again, I contact, Sue DeVries at the MEDC, who has just been a wonderful, community advocate for us. I think she's part of the CAT team is what they call it. I was able to call Sue and say, all right, let's talk about, creating, rental rehab. I know the MEDC has some kind of program with that kind of term in it. And she's like, oh, most definitely. And we've now just completed our second rental rehab program, just this past month, which has resulted in 4 more apartments in our downtown. So, we went from 7 to 11 to now 15 apartments, keep bringing people back downtown to live, which, as you just mentioned, that makes it better for business owners because now they have shoppers that are, 50, 100, 200 feet away instead of 10, 15, 20 miles away.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't have like suburbs in between. Well, I'll just cruise into the mall, or I'll cruise into the chain, or something like that. I can walk out of my apartment and I can grab some local coffee or a meal, or meet up with friends. Can you explain? Give me a little bit more detail about the rental rehab. What all it goes into that? Because I'm really intrigued to hear about that.
So that rental rehab program that, we worked with the MEDC on was the MEDC, would, give 75% of the cost. I think it was up to like $125,000 per unit. Don't quote me exactly on what the maximums were. But, the way it worked for us was we did 2 apartments at a time working with the developers. Mm-hmm. So one apartment had to be reserved for low income, which is extremely important and necessary in our economy, and then one could be market rate. And so working with the developers and the local contractors in the state to pull those off, I mean, it breathed new life into those buildings and helped create a living city. And that's what we all want, I think, when you're in public service, especially when you're a city manager. You want your cities to be living and breathing and active.
Yeah, and that integration of one has to be low income. I love that too, because like we know that housing is so critical in all of our communities. It's across the nation. Here in Michigan, we have to address this housing problem. And sometimes in the conversations we have, it's more housing is always better. And that's true to a certain extent, but that also can lead to some fracturing of the community. Marginalized groups become even more marginalized because they don't have access to this new housing. And then now you've taken what could have been a really incredible thing for a community, and you've made it only incredible for a few of people in the community because they can afford it. And so I love this equitable approach to housing while also giving you resources that you wouldn't have otherwise. We keep going back to this metaphor of picking up the bat phone. You can call up Sue at the MEDC and I know that you can help me. And she says, yes, I can. And that's got to be amazing for you as a city manager, as government, because you're getting help from somebody else that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah. Just highlighting and, reiterating again on that, the low income, equitable movement. I am a big champion of, diversity. I'm a big champion of just, I like to call it, mixed density, mixed income housing, because I believe we can learn from each other. We all come from different walks of lives. We all have different perspectives, and, making sure we're intermingling amongst each other, I think, is a great way to build, community. So that's the parts I get excited about, with that rental rehab program that MEDC had back then.
Yeah, I love how that can kind of dovetail into this other issue of attraction and retention. How do we persuade people to stay in our communities? How do we attract people to our communities? And if you look at the top 3 elements that really convince people that this is a community I want to stay in, it's number 2 is being inclusive of different kinds of people. And that goes to demographics related to wages and wealth and income and all of those things. We got to have all sorts of kinds of people in our communities because that's what makes them rich and interesting and vibrant and compelling and beautiful. And man, it sounds like you guys are doing that in Allegan. If somebody, let's say that another 5,000 person community in Michigan has heard about becoming a redevelopment ready community, they might have heard like, well, it's kind of a lot of work to go through the process, and that might make them a little bit timid. What would you tell them as far as actually going through the process and how the community can be improved afterwards?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, my predecessor really laid that groundwork for us. I was fortunate enough that, when I came here, within about 2 years, we had to recertify. The one thing I really appreciated about the recertification was it gave us a chance to do self-reflection as a community, as a government organization. We had to go through, make sure we still check, the boxes, the way the boxes needed to be checked. But at the same time, it allowed us to have those conversations with our planning commission, which is comprised of our residents, about reevaluate and reiterate what kind of community we want to be as we go through that process. So there is a lot of work, and sometimes it can be viewed as an additional layer, an unfunded mandate per se, as people like to say, from the state. I push back a little bit on that perspective because I think it is an opportunity for us to slow down a little bit and just once again reiterate what kind of community we want to be and re-engage with our residents through that process.
I think work can be unenjoyable when you don't really get anything out of it. There's no progress. There's no change that's been made. You do a year's worth of really hard work and you look back and like nothing really happened. And I spent all of this time and effort and energy. And I think that's a really compelling difference with something like the RSC certification is like, is it going to be work? It is, but it's going to be worth it. I mean, you just spent the last 15 minutes outlining this happened and then this happened and this happened. And look, now we have housing and it's equitable and businesses are encouraged. And now we have local developers coming out that wouldn't have had come out anyway. And it's just, it's worth it. It sounds like.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I hit on the big ones. Developers were able to, develop. It's what they do. Through the RRC process, the city was also able to, tap into technical assistance funding. We reached out to the MEDC roughly. It would have been like last January, last December. We reached out to them. So like at the end of 2022, 2023. We're a town of 5,000. We have 2 state trunk lines that converge on our town, or 3 state trunk lines that converge on our town. We got a river that meanders. It's very difficult to know where you're going in our town. Mm-hmm. So if you're driving in from the outside and hey, I want to go to Allegan's waterfront or riverfront, there's no good wayfinding signage system. Mm-hmm. Or, if you're coming in from Grand Rapids and hey, I want to try out, Shaindorf's Brewing, which is a nice restaurant and brewing facility we have here. It's kind of hard to know where you're going once you get into our town, because we had some one-way streets that were all just messed up and jacked up. So what we were able to do is get technical assistance to hire a wayfinding consultant. And they developed a comprehensive wayfinding plan for us for our entire community, not just our downtown, but the whole community, to direct people to our county fairgrounds, where we have the Allegan County Fair, one of the largest in the state. Mm-hmm. Direct people to the schools. So if you're driving in, there's a track meet, and you're coming from Grand Rapids, it's going to be easy to make your way through. So there's that technical assistance, that they were able to give us to allow us to figure out how can we, move people around our city. And this year we're going to start implementing parts of that plan with our own general fund. Mm. So
it's another bat phone.
It's another bat phone.
Yeah. Instead of having months and months of meetings and how do we do this wayfinding thing? And well, maybe we could do this. And I just spent 4.5 hours on the internet looking at different signs and all of these other things. You didn't have to do any of that. You could just call them up and say, hey, we're having this issue. And they say, we know exactly the person to connect you with. Yep. And we'll give you technical assistance funding for that. So you don't have to pay for it. And all you have to do is listen to what they say.
Correct. Connect us with the experts.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Joel, I want to thank you for this conversation. I have never been to Allegan, but that's going to change. I'm really, really excited to hear what you guys have going on. One of the most attractive things, at least to me, in a community is momentum. The feeling like the work is worth it and people are moving and things are happening, and that's so encouraging to me. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time. Send my best to all the folks in Allegan, and thanks so much for this conversation.
Thank you. Hey, you have a good day.
You too.